one of the good ones as well. I neglected to mention. Yeah, the Borg are interesting because they seem to be this ultimate hellish extension of what I refer to as microchip hell.
There you go, yeah.
Because what happens is, our global governmental people, the New World Order group, is looking to have all of us eventually be turned into a Borg-like creature.
Right.
Where we do not think for ourselves, and our actions are more automatic than they are autonomic.
Exactly. And it's a queen, I think, almost in that movie too, getting on the roll as the upper hand of this one. But it's very nice, presented the idea, and again that shows to me also that there is more behind Star Trek in that sense, that there is a warning, so to speak. There is a and highlight that should make you think about these things, that a possibility or a danger of going into the new frontiers, if you will, is these kind of scenarios where again this might not actually be as much about an alien race in the sense, but again this is an analogy to the human race, that this is some of the choices that we're confronted with. Should we merge with computer? What potentially could happen if we do that? And as you brought out, Kent, if microchipping or some kind of other implantation technology is involved in this, that's potentially a very scary scenario opening up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That could be very dangerous for the world at large. And this is hopefully one of the warnings that we will take from these shows, the Star Trek franchise, and apply them to our real lives so that we can avoid things like this in our own future.
Right.
And one of the things that I really like about Star Trek, and why I've been such a fan for all these years, is because of the fact that there is such a heavy morality, and there's always a moral to the story for every episode, and there's always something to be learned, even by the captain, who supposedly knows everything.
Right. Yeah, it's a very. Hey, by the way, I just thought of that. I guess it would be ashamed if we not mention it, and maybe if you're familiar with it, you can tell us about it. But are you familiar with the origins of Captain Spock? Not Captain Spock's hand sign that he performs. Are you familiar with that one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about that, Kent.
Yeah, that's from a Jewish mass, the Live Long and Prosper hand sign. That's actually a blessing in Judaism.
I think it also is connected with the Shin sign. It's a prayer, as you say, represented, I think, by the double W in the Phoenician / if you cross that over to the Hebrew alphabet, it forms like a double U a little bit, I guess, and what is interesting there is that's connected again with the Vulcan, and I think Jordan Maxwell brought that out because they're Vulcans. He tied this back to Yahweh, the Hebrew God of that this is connected with the mountain of Sinai, or where Moses goes up and to get the law, and that is basically a volcano. If you look at a lot of the symbolic iconography of both how the stories depicted, but also in a lot of the paintings and consequent pictures you can see of these events. So that's a very interesting hint, I guess, in there.
Yeah, definitely. Now that second part I never heard before, so thank you for sharing that with me.
Right.
I must have missed that lecture by Jordan.
Yeah, I mean it's and even for a while I know that clip actually was up on YouTube. Don't know if it's there anymore, but that's actually Leonard Nimoy standing there and explaining not all of the background of the sign itself, but how that he actually picked this up from a rabbi, I think, in his home when he was a kid. So it's right there. That's very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. One of the other interesting things about Star Trek that I mentioned at the beginning of our talk today are the nearly 100 different examples of real-life technology
Right.
that have been portrayed in the show and later had appeared in our real life.
Right.
And would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. Please go ahead, Kent.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this is that, as I mentioned before, there are no other examples of science fiction franchises such as Star Wars or any of the other Babylon 5 or any of the sci-fi shows that are popular now, the Stargate shows and so forth. They don't show real-life technology. They show like a computer, and you realize that this is a computer because you've seen these types of devices many other places, including your very own desktop. But what happens is, from the very first episode, which was shot in December of 1964, and it took 2 years for them to get Star Trek on the air because of the highly finely tuned information that had to be embedded into the show. The consultant, Harvey Lynn, from the Rand Corporation, had to make sure his information got into the mix. And it was from this episode alone, excuse me, it was from this episode alone where they begun this series of examples. Now, in this first episode, all the following technologies of the future were shown in the Star Trek pilot episode, The Cage. Large screen projection television is the view screen at the front of the bridge. Early version of a cell phone, and that's the Star Trek communicator. The stun gun, or also known as a phaser,
right,
is a type of technology that actually is said to exist at this point in the black ops world, in the black budget world of the U.S. Pentagon. We also see computer monitor displays. We see a particle beam weapon.
Right.
Various classified types currently exist. We see a fax machine on the actual bridge of the Enterprise. And what happens is the original captain, which was Captain Christopher Pike, had asked for some information, and they printed it out, and it comes rolling out on this piece of paper out of this little box machine. And this is a fax machine. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I had seen these, and I'm like, okay, let's start counting these and see how many of these examples we could come up with.
Yeah.
There is a book called the Star Trek Encyclopedia where I literally went page by page and looked at every single entry in this book, several hundred pages long,
Mm-hmm.
and picked out 88 examples of technology that have been shown in the various series.
What do you think that this could hint of in regards to the future, though? I'm thinking of, stuff like warp drive and things like that. I think that's in the pipeline too.
Well, actually, there are a couple of interesting books. One of them is called The Physics of Star Trek. It's a very short book. It's like a couple hundred pages long.
Mm-hmm.
But it is very interesting in what it talks about. It talks about things like the transporter technology, the holographic technology, the warp drive technologies. And it talks about how likely they are and whether or not they currently exist, either in theory or in prototype.
Right.
That may be classified. And so that was a very interesting book.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about those various technologies. And we see the beginnings of the holographic projection technology. For instance, when we play video games, that's the very first example of the holodeck, I believe.
Right, right.
You know, it takes you to an artificial environment that you cannot visit anywhere else, and it lets you roam freely through that environment in a three-dimensional way.
Right, right.
So I refer to these 3D video games like Halo and all the various other ones of that genre, Doom and Quake and things like that, where you can roam through these, various environments, as being the very first iteration of a holodeck.
Right, right. Well, it's the stuff. That's the way things usually work. It's a prelude, and I guess also that once we've imagined something, if you will, especially, and that's why sci-fi more generally also is a very interesting, topic or genre, I guess we could say, because it shows, especially young people, it gives them, it ignites the imagination in many cases, and I think in many cases also people who have, when they were young, have been watching sci-fi have grown up with that in mind and actually helped to develop a lot of scientific and also various technologies that actually are getting more and more close to the what used to be sci-fi but then later on turns up to be science or technology.
This past summer of 2007, I was in the hospital for a week because of hepatitis C infection complications. And,